How's everybody doing? Good, good, good. So just want to, before we get started, just welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it very much. Never take it for granted that you're interested in covering the team. I just want to thank a few people before we enter into basically two comments to make, and then happy to answer any questions that you guys have. First, I want to thank our fans from everywhere, all across the country, all across the world. Obviously, here in Oklahoma, and especially at Oklahoma City, we're so grateful for the support that we've received going into our second decade of basketball here, which is kind of hard to imagine. Feels like it's gone so quickly. Our partners, everybody that supports the team from a company level, especially OU Medicine, who we announced a partnership with yesterday, and some of you might have seen the sign on the building here. It's a tremendous opportunity for us, and we're very thankful for their support, especially because it's such an opportunity to help everyone in the state. So we're really, really happy about that. The community, everyone that's been with us from the beginning. I only have so many opportunities during a year to thank these people from personally and on behalf of the organization, so bear with me. It sounds like an Emmy speech or something, but we really do really are grateful for the community that we represent, and they inform so much about what we do. We want them to be proud of the team. And then, obviously, everyone that's in this room, the media, you guys have covered our team now going on. This will be our 11th season here, and there have been great relationships that have been built with Matt and his staff and our players, etc. And we're happy that we have the type of relationship that we have with you guys. It means a lot. Let me see. Let me go to my next thing here. 2 primary points. Okay. So just 2 things I want to hit, and then we'll take questions. One is kind of a tried and true kind of set of criteria that you've heard before, but I think it's important that we continue to reaffirm this about our organization, and those are some organizational fundamentals. And the other part is an opportunity with the team that we feel like still exists to continue to improve and get better, and that's obviously playing identity or basketball identity. I'll talk about both of those. First thing, organizational fundamentals. For us, these things are like kind of pillars to what we're focused on and trying to create going forward, and also reflect upon from our past. One, commitment to process. I think everybody here understands that for us, we want to think big but build small. We don't want to take the path of least resistance, and we don't want to be working on a day-by-day, approach. We want to be working towards a vision that we have and picking away at that strategically, every single day through that. Humility. That's another really important trait for us. I think there's a big difference between being confident and being arrogant. Confidence is critical to lead. Confidence is critical to compete at the highest levels, but we never want to be arrogant, and that's an important thing for us to always hold true to. Development of people, players, staff, creating an environment where people can do their best work. And always thinking about what people can do and not necessarily focusing on the things they can't do gives them the best chance of optimizing their performance here and beyond. And I think that's been the lifeblood of our organization since we've been here since 2008 is development and a commitment to that. We'll have to continue to do that regardless of whether we're winning 20 games, 50 games, or in between. And then leadership. This will be our first season that Nick Collison won't be with the team. You'll probably see him. He'll be around occasionally. But I think that with his retirement opens up a whole new opportunity for Russell and Paul George to put their imprint as leaders on the team. And I'm really excited for that because I think they're great complements to one another. I think they are both great people. And they'll be the people that we'll be leaning on when we hit adversity. They'll also be the people we'll be leaning on when we have success and we need to manage that success effectively. And I think it's opportunity for growth for both of those guys. And when you're at such a high level as they are as players, this is another opportunity. I'm excited to see them take on that mantle in Nick's absence. That kind of concludes like the organizational fundamentals. Those are things you've probably heard me say over the years. The other thing would be the identity of play. This is an area that we're constantly evolving in. We've been here for 10 years, and we've constantly been tweaking and adjusting, and the world changes around you, and the game changes. One thing for us we think is going to be really important this season is going to be to continue to have a defensive identity. We can't take for granted just because on paper we look like we should be a really good defensive team that's going to happen. It's the space between there that really defines excellence and our ability to be consistently effective, defending and doing it in a way that is extremely consistent, not just against this opponent or that opponent or on the road or at home. And our defense has always been something that's been critical to us because of how we play offensively in terms of the speed that we want to play with. And we can't take for granted that we're going to be a really good defensive team just because we have some really elite defenders. The other thing, much has been written about the Thunder want to play faster, and and obviously with some of the additions to the roster, with Nerlens and bringing Jeremy back, and obviously Dennis, physically, we can play faster. But I thought it'd be important to kind of break down for everybody. Like for us, speed and tempo are different than just getting up the floor. So first thing would be when people think about playing faster, they think about playing faster offensively. There's two sides to the floor. So we need to have speed and tempo defensively and offensively. The other thing is people think about speed with respect to just style of play. But in reality, we want to be faster making decisions, on both sides of the floor. We do want to be faster, obviously, physically. We want to be faster in how quickly we recognize situations within the game. We want to be faster and play with more speed with respect to how quickly we recover from setbacks in terms of our resiliency and our turnaround time. These are all parts of playing fast. These are all, to us, these are all parts of playing with tempo. And the key goal here is playing quicker, playing faster, thinking faster, but still being really efficient. Because at the end of the day, with how good the players are in this league and how good the coaching has become in this league, efficiency is king. And one of the things that for us we feel like is important is playing in rhythm. So we feel like playing faster and playing in rhythm, allows us to be more efficient. And that goes again for both sides of the ball. So those things are critical. Again, we want to be playing our best basketball at the end of the season, and we want to be a work in progress that's identifiable. So, we want to set out, put some things out there in training camp, and by the end of the season, we want that to be a recognizable form. We don't want to get to the beginning, a point in the season where there's regression to what we're trying to do. Of course, there's going to be adaptation. You're going to have to adjust. Things happen. Whatever the plan is, coming into training camp, it's going to get disrupted in first practice because, or the first game. But we want to make sure that, the intention and the implementation, the execution goes throughout the season. And that's a challenge because there's all different types of opportunities to change course or regress. And I think we have an opportunity now with the continuity that we have to really build towards something and build something sustainable. And I think Billy and his staff they've worked incredibly hard this summer. I think they're going to do a great job. And I think the continuity, when you think about it, we've lost Carmelo, we've added Dennis, but the remaining group is pretty much in place, and I think that's going to be a welcome thing. As I said at the end of the season, that's one of the things that I think has been a real challenge for Billy, is that the team has changed quite a bit, and he's had to adapt and adjust. And now I think that there's a little more recognition coming into the year, albeit. We're going to have some injuries, but I'm sure you guys will ask me about that. But I think that's where the opportunity is also for this team. So just kind of summarize the kind of opening points. First, the fundamentals that we've talked about for years, we can never, ever take those for granted here. They're critical to how we got to this point, and they're going to be critical about how we continue to sustain, and continue to write the future for the team. Commitment to process, humility, focus on development, and leadership. Those things are critical for us, and I think for a lot of other organizations in both sports and business. And then the identity of play, in terms of making sure we continue to be an elite defensive team and putting in the work to do those things, focusing on playing faster, but what that really means, and the hope that we become a more efficient team. And then also, obviously, having an identity that we can begin to build small and ultimately expand, and hopefully have it be a great foundation to be playing our best basketball at the end of the year. So with that, I'd answer any questions.
I know he'll be evaluated in 4 weeks, but is this something that the organization is confident he can return, Russell Westbrook return 100% for game one, or does having Dennis Schroeder make it have a little bit more breathing room that you can ease him back into the lineup maybe a week into the season?
Well, first, we would never push Russell, or any player for that matter, onto the floor because of a specific date. You know what I'm saying? The season starts on this date, so I think that would be foolish, and we've never done that, so we wouldn't start doing that now. He's going to be reevaluated. It was a pretty minor thing that he had to have done, and he'll be back. We'll see how that reevaluation goes, but then you've got to work through rehab to non-contact to contact to and then you got to get back to the level that you play at normally. So it's a process, but having Dennis is kind of a separate thing, I think, than really that's not determining Russell's recovery. Having Dennis is great for us. I think, as I said before, there's silver linings in all of the different adversities that we faced over the years, even though at the time some of them have been hard to identify. But I think that's one of the things that we're most proud of, is when we are delivered situations, whether they're within our control or not. Okay, how do we make this positive? How do we work on this? And I think with Dennis, he's going to get a ton of opportunity to work with Paul George, Billy Donovan, his new teammates. We're going to learn a lot about his game. To me, that's a great opportunity. Of course, it makes it a lot better going through that, knowing that Russell's coming back pretty soon. But what can we scrape out of this situation to inform us of how we can be a better team? In some ways, it compartmentalizes things. You're going to be having to do a lot of things in training camp, and now, unfortunately, without Russell, that's going to limit what you can do with that. So it allows you to put that much more focus on building the infrastructure of the team without Russell, and then allowing him to assimilate back. I feel like I should touch on Dre, just because I think the next question is going to be on Dre. So I've done this long enough to just save everybody the time. So with respect to Dre, he's doing well. He's back on the floor. He's going to go through parts of training camp with us, non-contact. So you'll probably see him shooting. You might see him doing some scripting. He's got to work himself from the non-contact part to contact, and then obviously he's got to get back to performance, which would be game situations. I can't tell you exactly when that's going to be. We don't think we're going to be without him very long, but again, this is medicine. This is human performance. This is body. So sitting up here and saying this is when that's going to happen, I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that he's doing a lot more this week than he was doing last week, and he's through the hardest part of this recovery process. and he's back with the ball in his hands and scripting things and on the treadmill and all those types of stuff. But then he's got to get to the point where we can put him in contact situations and comfortable with that. Once he passes those benchmarks, then he'll be able to get back on the floor in a competitive situation. So, but both of those guys, we feel good that we'll have them at some point relatively early in the year.
Sam, is there anything you'd like to add to the team this year?
Well, the thing, yeah, always. I think the trick for us, and one of the things that is inherent in roster building, or really just anything that you're trying to improve, is every time you do something to improve, you are creating another situation somewhere else. Like, you're never going to get to perfect. Like, that just probably doesn't exist. You know, in order to get Dennis Schroeder, like, that's going to create something somewhere else. You can't solve one thing without it disrupting something else. So that's why teams are constantly evolving. I'd love for us to have more shooting. I mean, I think you look at the team and you say, well, on paper, if we look at these numbers, like I totally see that. So there's 3 ways in which we can improve that. One, like, we can go out and try to find someone that's a better shooter than what we have, but they have to be better than the players we currently have at the existing positions, and they have to be so much better that they overcome whatever deficiencies or strengths of the player they're replacing has. So that's one thing. And then obviously we're pretty limited in terms of our team building tools and mechanisms because of the cap system. Second thing would be guys can step up and make some shots. Like, that's another way you can get better is, you know, we need some guys to make some shots, you know. I mean, and I think that, you know, all of our guys are capable, talented, and I expect them to make some shots. That's another way you can become a better shooting team. And then the other way would be if we're not making shots, like, what kind of shots are we taking? So in today's day and age, like, if there's shots that aren't really good shots or high-quality shots, not taking them and distributing that possession to another place on the floor could actually make us a much better shooting team. So how efficiently are you playing? How good are the shots that you're taking? Sometimes you can become a much better shooter by taking the ones that are really good for you. Dre's a great example of that. Shot 56% from the floor last year. And he did that simply by taking the ones that were right there for him, that were right in his wheelhouse. I gave a book to a lot of people in our organization this summer. I think it's an unbelievable book. I just stumbled upon it, and I've heard about it for years, but The Science of Hitting by Ted Williams. I mean, that book is brilliant. And I think it applies to everything, not just sports, but and it's all about decisions. And it's all about choice, and it's all about restraint, and it's all about discipline. And his insight into his craft is just unbelievable. And I think that's why, you know, that you get to 400 by swinging at the pitches you want to swing at, you know, not the ones that the pitcher's choosing for you to swing at. And I read this book, and I handed it out to a lot of people because I think it's a great metaphor for so many things in the world. And not just for basketball, or sports, but I think that speaks to some of the ways that we ourselves can maybe move the needle in some areas.
Do you see Dennis in sort of a Reggie Jackson type role, or something different for him, perhaps?
Well, I mean, so first thing with Dennis, the thing with him that really struck me, when you really start to dig into him and think about him, is the guy's 24 years old. I mean, he's younger than Steven. He's younger than Alex. He's the same age as Jeremy. He's the same age as who else is in that group? I was looking at it. Anyway, 24 is young. But he's got a ton of experience, which I think is really beneficial. So what kind of role do we foresee him in? I don't know. I think his skill set is really, really well aligned to the way that we and Billy, sees the team playing. And Billy specifically, like, really feels like paint attacks are going to be really important for our team. And Dennis is a guy that lives in the paint, and having multiple people that can do that creatively is, I think, an important part for our team. I wouldn't want to put any limitations or say you need to be this person. We have had a lot of success with a player like that, like a dynamic ball handler with Russell, and so I think there's opportunity there, but he's going to have to develop that, and he has a lot of work to do. I mean, he's only 24, and his best basketball is way in front of him, obviously, for him, like maybe the biggest impact he can have on our team right away is defensively, and he has the chance to be an elite defender, and we've got to get him back to that.
Sam, when you talk about increasing the pace of the speed, whatever word you want to use, forwards with Jeremy and with Patrick, I assume they're going to play a pretty big role in that. What would you? But they're really different players, so I'm curious from your perspective what you want to see out of those guys as it relates to speed of the game.
Yeah, well, as I said before, I think that I look at it more like tempo of the game, because tempo to me creates rhythm. Not to use a music metaphor, but I think the tempo creates the rhythm, and the rhythm should affect the efficiency. With those two guys specifically, Jeremy's an incredibly, obviously physically, he's at the 99th percentile as an athlete. He's a prototype in a lot of ways. On both ends of the floor, Patrick plays quickly mentally. I mean, he is a quick decision maker. The ball doesn't stick with him. If you give him opportunities to keep the ball moving, possessions don't die with him. I'm excited for Billy because one of Billy's strengths is being creative, improvising, and I just think that there's a lot of interchangeable pieces to the team that he has to sort out. I don't know how those guys specifically will what roles they'll play, other than I'm pretty confident they're going to play increased roles. But I do think that playing with more tempo on both sides of the ball plays to both of those guys' strengths. It also really plays to the strengths of our best players. But again, it's you can play as fast as you want, but can you play efficiently? And one of the things that our staff has spent a lot of time thinking about, and just we all kind of agreed on in thinking about it, was like, I think every business is facing the same challenges, which is the speed of everything is so much faster today, and a big part of that is technology. And so the opportunity for you to be able to adjust, adapt, make decisions in everything is shrunk. So, but you also have to have a consistency of purpose to have an identity. So you can't just shoot from the hip all the time, and because things have sped up around you, you have to still be efficient. That's the biggest challenge. And for us, that's why the tempo component is important. It's not just how fast we get the ball up the court. It's the decisions we make once it's there. And if those decisions can lead to better opportunities. And how do you get there? I think that's what's invigorated Billy and his staff, because they feel like we have some quick decision makers. We have some guys that can get up the floor quickly. And I think there's opportunities for us to continue to play efficiently throughout the year, but it's going to take some time. But it's not just tempo is not just offense or physical. Tempo is mental as well, and then also emotional with respect to how you can work through setbacks and resiliency during the game itself, so that you can actually perform. So I'm excited to see the team take shape, and I know Billy and I think our players are as well.
So eventually Russell's going to come back, and then he and Dennis are going to be guys that could potentially play together. How do you envision that working, considering that they're two guys who have games that are both predicated off pick and roll?
Sure. I think that's one of the things we talked a lot about. Billy, when we were talking about potentially adding Dennis, he loves the idea of having, another ball handler like that on the floor, and really sees a ton of value in getting to the paint, from multiple angles on the floor. Again, I think the way the game is today, like, you know, the people pick up on patterns. That's how human beings operate. They recognize patterns. That's how we learn everything. So the more creative and the different ways in which people are attacking and coming from things. I don't like. One of our assistant coaches made a good point to me the other day. He said, you know, random seems uncontrolled or unplanned. So not just random play, but like creative play, I guess, is the way that Europe is really looking at how offense is changing. And I think that Dennis and Russell together gives us more creativity on the floor. And also, you know, they have an advantage all the time. Now, if there's multiple people on the floor that you don't know where that's coming from, and those guys can make those plays, it just opens up more options for us. But that's something we thought about and we talked about, and I think our coaches put a huge premium on get to the paint. And we have some other guys that, you know, we're working with to see if they can continue to do that as well. But the trade-off is the shooting. I mean, we understand that, but there's other ways for us to score and generate offense, and then defensively, those two guys should be excellent together.
Have you received any more insight into Dennis's legal situation?
Not more than what we're privy to at this point, but because it's a legal matter, I can't really speak too much to that, other than to say that I wouldn't expect it to be a distraction for the team in any way or for him, and he's handling it with the appropriate parties.
Sam, the Paul George re-up this summer, perhaps you heard, and it seemed like that did two things. One, it sort of endorsed all the things you've been talking about all for 10 years about setting up a culture that's attractive to players, that kind of thing. And, maybe not necessarily enticing outward free agents, but keeping the ones that you have. But it also was an endorsement of Russell, which went against the long-held narrative that people don't like playing with him. How important were those two factors in relation to Paul's decision?
I don't know what you're saying with Russell. What was the first one?
Your culture. You want to build something that's attractive to players.
I don't know. I mean, I think I don't want to speak for all the players that have been here. You know what I'm saying? But we've had a lot of players that tell us that they've had great experiences here, that they enjoy playing here. And a lot of times by the way that those comments are made is because we're constantly asking them, like, what can we do better? Like, where can we improve? Like, you know, what does it mean to play for the Thunder? How do you want to be remembered playing here? What should it feel like to play for the organization? We want to know, because we don't have all the answers, and I think everyone here could probably attest, if you've been here for 10 years, that we've really evolved as an organization, and we should. We've learned a lot. We want to be a learning organization. We want to constantly be pushing ourselves to figure out what we can do better, and I think we're always asking those questions. I don't know how big a factor that was in Paul's decision. I think it did matter, but we want to stand for more than what we do, and I think people can feel that. And we also need to own the fact that we don't have all the answers, and we got to keep working. You can never take anything for granted, other than not other than, but and the number one thing is like you got to realize that players are people. And they need support, and they also need to be challenged as well at certain times. And you got to have some hard conversations with people, and you got to be honest with them. And I think that that's a big part of the environment we want to have. I don't think you can get anywhere in an environment where you're appeasing people, but I do think you can get very far in an environment where you have some empathy, some honesty, and some clarity. And that's all you can hope for. With Russell, again, like we are not totally exposed to the narratives because Nick Collison and I had this conversation a number of times. It's just like we live in the reality. So going outside of that to get insight doesn't make a lot of sense because we are actually living there every day. We know what's going on. That doesn't diminish the importance or the role of opinion, people writing or talking about. We want that. That is healthy. Like every time you guys cover the team, like that's so good for our organization. But the narratives that exist outside or why they're out there, those of us that work in the industry and that work inside the building every day, you know, we know like the NBA has become an incredible entertainment business. And I think one of the biggest challenges that every team has is keeping your eye on the ball. Not to use the Ted Williams example, but like to keep your eye on the ball of like, okay, what's important to us? What's really driving us to be the best we can be, to build a legacy for the organization, and how much is that distracting if we know that that's not accurate? So I don't necessarily think that people that have played with Russell uniformly would say that. Do I think that he raises the bar in some areas? He does. He does raise the bar in some areas. Do I think there's things he can improve on? Absolutely. And I think he would tell you that himself. I've never known him to resist, honest, candid dialogue or conversation. I just don't know that. I've never seen him disrespect a coach. I've never seen him disrespect, a teammate in a way that is pervasive. I mean, he's emotional, and that's the league we play in. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't want to take the emotion away from our players, but at the end of the day, we have to respect one another for sure. But I think Russell's a guy that shows up at Nick Collison's retirement party. He's at Paul George's fishing event. He's behind the scenes at all those things, and I think that stuff does matter. But he's growing, evolving also. And that's the great thing about him is he wants to constantly get better. But we've never really been totally immersed in that. We know it's there, but we also kind of see every day the way that things happen.
With Russell turning 30, in November, is there an organizational plan to prolong his prime, maintain his health, considering his style of play and the fact that he's coming off of the surgery?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a couple things that we think about with that. One, for the most part, he's never played high minutes. That's been a consistent thing for several years now. I don't know where he checked in last year, but for the most part, he's around 34, 35, something like that. He is in his prime right now. And he's been available for 90+% of the games over his career and 99% of the games over the last 2 years. Is that going to last forever? I mean, that's a pretty high bar to stay at 99%. But players that that are at his level, when we talk about like regression or anything like that. Like we're talking about going from being the MVP of a league or an all-NBA player, regressing as he gets older to small percentages from that. So now you're talking about being an all-star level player or so we're starting at such a high bar that, eventually, when he's 35 years old, like he's probably not going to play the way he did when he was 30, for sure. But we're also talking about a player that's been an all-NBA player for 7 years, and usually if you go back and look at the data, like the guys that make it 7 years end up being 10 years all-NBA teams. Other thing about Russell that I think is so promising about his future is that players that play in the backcourt like that have that kind of success, once they hit 30, their shooting numbers become much better. And that's how they become more efficient players. So there's so many ways for him to continue to evolve. He's going to have to work at that going forward, but I mean, he's right in the middle of his best years, and he still has a lot more at this level, and that's just proved by the last 2 years. So we've been so fortunate to have him. We obviously have a responsibility to make sure that we're always doing what's best for him. I feel like we have done that. And, I think he's always going to be thinking, just like every great player, like, how do I keep adding to my game? How do I keep evolving? And if you look at, players of his size and that played in the backcourt at that level, all NBA level, their shooting numbers and efficiency numbers start to go up as they get older. And I really think that would happen the same way for him.
Jenny kind of touched on this with Patrick, but do you feel like he has to start when you're talking about the shooting?
One of the things that I think is really important with in general, but with Billy is we have to let Billy make those decisions. So. The other thing about Billy is he's always asking for opinions. He's a constant learner. So it doesn't matter what role you play in the organization. He will ask you. And that's, I think, what makes him great is he's curious. But at the end of the day, he knows that he has to make the calls. He has to make the decisions. Like, he's in charge of what happens, on the once the ball's tipped up and once we're competing, he makes all the decisions relative to what happens between the lines. I know he likes both those players, so
Both being
Jeremy and Pat, yeah. So it will be interesting to see, what he does there. But the other thing is, I thought he did a really interesting thing last year. This is one of the reasons why I think he's, such a valuable piece to the organization. We had with Melo and Patrick and Jeremy, there's not a lot of minutes there at the 4, and I thought that his ability to get Jeremy into that 5 position, and find that created value for the organization. And I think that's a really, really important part to the role of a head coach in today's NBA, is you have to be able to carve your own pieces because of and development being a huge component of that, because of the limitations of the cap and the system, and just how good the other teams are, how good the scouting is. Analytics have, it used to be that having the numbers was a huge advantage. Now it's not. You can get those off the internet, and now it's implementation of the numbers, and not just how you implement them, but you're implementing them against a field that's all using the same thing. So how big of an advantage is it now? So Billy, I think, has always tried to stay ahead of that. And with Jeremy, he found a way to create value, play him at the 5. Now with Nerlens, who we think is a pretty interesting player for our team and our identity of play, we probably see Jeremy a little more 4, depending on what role Nerlens plays. But just like you guys, I'm interested to see how it comes together. I do think that there's a lot to work with. There'll be some decisions that have to be made, but that's why he's a head coach, and I think he'll do a great job with it.
We were just talking about Russell and his career arc and everything. I'm just curious, with Mo Cheeks being so instrumental to him, what was your experience like at the Hall of Fame?
Oh, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I had not been to the Hall of Fame. I lived not far from it. I should say not far from it. It's hours away, but in the same state. And being there with Mo is great. I think Mo is a great ambassador. The thing I love about Mo Cheeks more than anything is I think he has class, and I think he has humility. This is a guy that has done everything and is now in the Hall of Fame, but he'll sit there and he'll go through organizational meetings. He'll listen to a guy from, Stanford talk to him about, analytics, and we'll listen and try to learn. And he might have a few comments back, but it's a dialogue. And so, like, I think that's so healthy for people in our organization to see that, especially young people, just the humility that he brings. The other thing that happened to me at the Hall of Fame that really struck me, and I think this is an important thing, is I was walking through the exhibits, and there was one that just, there was an exhibit on a man named John McClendon, who's a coach. And I was reading his bio, and then I walked away. And I wait, did I read that right? He was mentored by James Naismith. He was the first African-American graduate from Kansas of physical education. And really a pioneer for minority coaches, and literally went to Kansas to be tutored by Naismith at a time when I think we all know that the world was not where it needed to be. And it really boggled my mind that I didn't have a lot of I had heard his name, but I didn't realize that this is a man that was at the very, very the nucleus of the game. And he's a man that people should know about because he pioneered so much in so many ways. And he wrote a book all about fast break basketball. And it is so ahead of its time. It's scary. So he learned the game from Naismith, but he innovated the game. He was the first coach to coach speed, tempo. He's also the inventor of the four corners, which I don't think a lot of people are aware of. He had a team at Tennessee State, win 3 championships in a row. He took a team from Tennessee State to Duke. They played the first game of that kind, but they had to do it in a closed gym. And he's one of the few people that have gone into Hall of Fame as a coach and a contributor. And unfortunately, he went in as a coach second. But some people were able to get that corrected. But this is a true, like a critical person in the history of the game. And I was a little bit, I'll be honest, I was embarrassed. I did not know as much about him as needs to be known. So we're going to figure out and do some things. I don't know how we're going to do it yet, but there's a whole story to be told off of this, and I want to make sure that happens. And there's a great amount of information you can get. I know, because like once you start digging into it, it's there. But this is a man that learned the game from Naismith, with Naismith, who was peers with Fog Allen. And I just don't know if people understand the impact he had. And, you know, obviously for minority coaches, like what he did, I mean, this is amazing. And he's a man that needs to be recognized even more so, I think, than that I believe he has been so far. So I've talked to some different people about ways we can do that, and I'm really excited about it because there's history is a great thing because it keeps teaching you. And I hope high school coaches all through the state of Oklahoma are talking about this man and explaining what he really represents, because he's a true game changer, and we can probably learn a lot from him.
You mentioned Nerlens Noel. You think you get him on the right, good contract coming off the Dallas situation at the right time?
We're really excited about Nerlens. I think that again, like, he represents a lot of things that we value. One thing about him that I don't think people realize is, like, he's a good passer, and we got to figure out how we use that. He's a good decision maker with the ball. I'm from Massachusetts, and so is Nerlens. He played at Everett High, so I've been hearing about Nerlens Noel since he is in middle school. You know, he had other places he could have gone, and he chose to come here, and we painted a pretty uphill battle for him to see if he'd be willing to accept it. And the fact that he picked to come here and has put in the type of work that he's put in so far this summer is encouraging to me. But there's still more to do. And but the fact that he chose to come here when there was no promises of anything tells me a lot about what he wants to do and what he's trying to accept. This is a guy that went 6th in the draft, and if he didn't get injured, he probably would have gone 1. So, you know, we want to feel like we can help, as I said before, develop, identify, and create a platform for guys to play well and to thrive. We've had success in the past with some guys that have stubbed their toe or maybe had underperformed. And what we're not going to do is judge him off of everything that, you know, the past. It's going to inform us, but we're going to let him. He has to create his own identity here. We're going to create an environment that hopefully can bring the best out of him. But I mean, he can really protect the rim. He can run up the floor. I mean, he can get up the floor, but he can keep the ball moving. He can keep possessions alive, and he can switch, which I think, you know, used to be, and now it's a straight up strategy. You know, it used to be a last resort, but now that's how you're neutralizing some other aspects of offense.
You were really optimistic last preseason about Steven coming off the work that he did in the offseason. You know, what have you seen from him coming into camp this season?
Well, the thing about Steven that I would say is first of all, people forget the guy's like 25 years old. So Dennis is younger than him. But, you know, Steven's got like 5 years before he's in his prime. And when you think about the centers in the league that are still going to be in their prime 5 years from now, it's a small group that you feel like are a really good group right now. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be always a group coming behind, especially in this last draft. But, you know, he's the thing that's hard with Steven is he's like a good to great company that has made such small improvements each year that there hasn't been these like big aha moments of, wow, that's totally different. His improvement has been so steady and over such a long period of time now. The distance traveled is remarkable. I mean, he's come so far, but it's come by a real process, a real small season after season process. He can have a huge impact on our team and the reason he's so valuable to us, he has such a big impact on our team by doing things that are within his control. There's not a lot of players that can impact a team or the game in controllable areas, meaning Steven and just how hard he runs the floor, how quickly he gets out of pick and rolls and barrels to the rim to suck the defense in. The fact that he knows the schemes the way he does. I always say be a great Patriot, you know, in the NFL. Like he knows coverages, he knows schemes, he knows defense. And then his physicality. Like he's a guy that you know he's on the floor. And he doesn't have to try. I know he's in the room. I'm not playing against him. Like those are things that are within his control, and just by doing those things, he makes a massive impact on our team. For those of you, I don't know how many rugby fans we have in the audience, but you know, obviously the All Blacks in New Zealand, where he was raised, they're known for kind of their selfless team intangibles up and down the entire roster. And you know, when Steven plays like an All Black for us, he's a game changer. And the good thing is, like, he's willing to do those things that don't get recognized. One thing we have to do always, and we do internally, is make sure we recognize those things so he keeps doing them. But he's a game changer for us in controllable areas. It doesn't have to be a hot shooting night. He doesn't necessarily need someone else to get him going. He can actually do these things and help a team win. And again, like, in the era of fantasy sports, sometimes you can get distracted by that. But again, like great teams, it's all about the gray area and the things in between it. And I think Steven Adams represents that. With that being said, we expect him to take another jump this year, you know. But just being consistent in those areas as an all-black type player, he affects the team, and his mentality affects the team because he's trying to do the right things all the time. Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned Nick before, and obviously he made the decision to retire after the season was over. Do you guys have any plans to try to do anything? You talking about history got me thinking about his history with the team.
Yeah.
Any plans on anything with him?
Yeah, well, you know, I've talked to Nick this summer, just like every summer, to be honest with you. Our communication's been pretty strong. We want to help him any way we can decide what it is that he ultimately wants to do. He's had such a huge impact on the team and represents so much of you know, what we want to stand for and what we're about. I don't know. I don't have a definition for what it will be because I think he wants to take some time with his family, and rightfully so. But we'll recognize him. He'll always be a part of the family. He'll always have a place here. And I say this all the time. Like sometimes, like in the life cycle of an organization, like the right guy comes along at the right time, and it just so happened to be that he was with us, you know, during our infancy stages. So we'll always recognize that. And you know, there's multiple ways to do that, and you know, we're going to figure out how we do it. But he'll always be a
Sam, have you
critical man.
Last one here. Television play-by-play person, and how weird and hard was the process and decision not to bring Brian back?
Well, I hate to defer questions, but truthfully, like Dan Mahoney is the person that you have to talk to about play-by-play announcer, and he oversees that department. I don't oversee that department. So, you know, BD was great, and I think everyone knows that. But and I'm sure that whoever we bring on will do a great job and continue the you know, the work that was done there. But I don't want to seem like I'm dodging the question, but I think that Dan is working on that, and I think he'll have an announcement shortly on that.
Sam, the last one more. You can't speak on other teams and what's going on right now in the league, but just thinking about what you guys went through with Paul and, you know, Paul favoring Los Angeles in the beginning of the process, and a lot of the talk being about him going to Los Angeles. I mean, do you think that what you all have been able to accomplish with getting him to re-sign here and getting him to buy into the Thunder has had like an effect on the rest of the league in terms of guys you talk to and how they approach free agents or guys who might be becoming free agents and going after these big fish?
I don't think so. I mean, I really don't. I think that every team has their own way of going about it. That's what makes the league great. I definitely don't think that any team's like looking at us and saying, you know, using us in any way, because every situation is so unique and so different. There's like a convenience probably of to storytelling, right? That you can pull these different disparate pieces together and tell a story. And sometimes it might be right, but I don't think it is the case all the time. And everyone has different reasons why they make their decisions. For us, we kind of covered that with you know, kind of why we felt that was the right thing for us. But I also do think that, excuse me, the competition in the league is so it's become so competitive. The business itself is thriving as a result of the things that Adam Silver has instituted or continued and evolved on top of what David Stern did, and then obviously Adam has kind of instituted and built off of that. So the league is in a really healthy place. The competition is incredible. Obviously, the Western Conference no one even asked me about the fact that LeBron is playing in the Western Conference now, which is, I mean, another incredible player in the West. And I think what you're seeing is like the cycles of teams they're much shorter because there's so much adversity that you face as a team in the NBA now because of, there's going to be injuries, Then you've got a whole component of the business side of the basketball that is unique. I have so much respect for the guys that with the other teams, the general managers with the other teams. They're brilliant, and like I know that because I've watched what they do, and I admire so many of them. And the coaching is on another level than it's been, in my opinion. So teams are able to get more out of what they have. And the game is evolving, the style of play is evolving, and with that, Eric, the reason why I say all those things is because I think that's pushing people to do things because they know that it's really, really hard to find stability, sustainability, and to keep momentum in today's NBA because the competition is what it is, and everyone's looking to gain edges, and I like that. I like the competition that comes with the NBA. I think it's great, but I also think that it's a totally different league than it was even 5 years ago. And I think everyone has to adapt and adjust and understand that. And that's one of the reasons why you're seeing maybe a one-year prime free agent become more valuable than in the past, even if you're not able to keep them because they're just so hard to get those players. And generally, the only way in the past you could get those players was through the draft, but they've passed the rules that have made that even harder. Do you know what I'm saying? So, therefore, your risk tolerance has to be a little bit higher if you want to try to stay innovative and aggressive. And you also have to be willing to rebuild, to restart, to reimagine, and you also should be optimistic too. Though I mean, so I think that's when everyone trades for those types of players is because they think it makes them better. So. We'll see. I think it's a function of a lot of things. And then next summer, with all the salary cap space that's out there, will be another bonanza. And we'll see. The whole league will change as a result of what happens there. But it's just a really dynamic time in the NBA. That's why I'm happy for us that we have some stability, we have some continuity. And that, we've got a good group of core players that are in their prime. We also have a group of emerging players that we have to keep fostering and developing because they'll be the key to sustaining, ultimately. So we need those younger guys to keep growing and supporting the core guys. But we like how we're positioned. But it's a crazy world. So, one other thing I just wanted to say before I close up. I managed to do this press conference without falling asleep. My wife and I had twin girls last night. So I was very man. I talked. I didn't want that to become. This is a small town here, so I didn't want that to be. You guys to find out later and feel as if I was not a human being by letting that be known, but also didn't think it was right to start the press conference that way because obviously you didn't come here to hear about my personal life. Excuse me. But I just feel like it's important to say that, and everyone's healthy and all that stuff. So Millie and Elise are their names, family names, and. We're thrilled and excited. So, but I wanted to make sure that I'm pretty happy, so, as you can probably tell. So, but I did want to make sure that I acknowledged that. But I knew that wasn't the first thing you guys wanted to hear about.
Everybody's having twins on this team.
Yeah. So,
Have you slept it off?
Actually, I have because I have my son is 3.5. So, I was with him last night to make sure that he feels. Nick, if you're listening, I'm really focused on you right now. Yeah, making sure that he's off to school and not totally disrupted. But I'll be going back to see my wife right now, and her mom is in town for everything. So yeah, but I just felt obligated to share that because it's a small town here, and so I wouldn't want you to think I went through today without acknowledging that. All right, thank you so much.